So, it has been an inexcusably long time for me to follow this up. Man, the first video I did about this, me reading it, whenever I did it, I was absolutely not expecting for it to get as popular as it did. And so, it is for that reason that it is absolutely, inarguably necessary. Hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. I had to do a follow-up here, so here we are with Chapter 2. Y'all know what this is. Gadsby, the book that does not use the letter E. Lots changed, hasn't it? By now, Branton Hills was so proud of not only its smarting up, but also of its startling growth. On that account, that an application was put forth for its incorporation as a city, a small city, naturally, but full of that condition of youth known as growing pains. So its shabby old town hall sign was thrown away, and a black and gold onyx slab with City Hall blazing forth in vivid colors put up amidst band music playing, flag waving, parading, and oratory. And only a month from that glorious day, Gadsby found folks primping up, girls putting on bright ribbons, boys finding that suits could stand a good ironing, and rich widows and portly matrons almost outdoing any rainbow in brilliancy. An occasional shop along Broadway, which had a rattly door or shaky windows, was put into first-class condition to fit Branton Hill's status as a city. Old Bill Simpkins was strutting around as pompous as a drum major. For now, that old town council would function as city council, his own stamping ground. According to him, from it, at no far day, Bill Simpkins, city councilman, would show an anxiously awaiting world how to run a city. Though probably, I think, how not to run it. It is truly inspiring what a narrow mind, what a blind outlook a man brought up with practically no opposition to his boyhood wants can attain. Though brought into contact with indisputably important data from improving his city, our organization boys thought Bill a bit off. But Gadsby would only laugh at his blasts against paying out city funds for, all bombs don't burst. You occasionally find a dud. Very confusing use of commas and semicolons and apostrophes. But this furor for fixing up rattly doors or shaky windows didn't last, for old Bill's oratory found favor with a bunch of his old school tightwads, who actually thought of inaugurating a campaign against Gadsby's organization of youth. As soon as this was known about town, that mythical pot known as public opinion was boiling furiously. A vast majority stood back of Gadsby and his kids, so old Bill ranks could count only a small group of rich old Shylocks to whom a bank book was a thing to look into or talk about only annually. That is, on bank balancing days. This small minority got up a slogan, "Why spoil a good old town?" and actually did, off and on, talk a shopman out of fixing up his shop or grounds. Oh, wait, hold on. Chapter 2. Okay, yeah, just making sure I'm reading Chapter 2. Okay, why spoil a good old town, and actually did, off and on, talk a shopman out of fixing up his shop or grounds. This, put additional vigor into our organization, inspiring a boy to bring up a plan for calling a month, say July, Pick Up, Paint Up, and Wash Up Month, for it was a plain fact that all about town make the text bigger. But, and I lost my place. Uh-oh. Vigor. It starts off with vigor and... Ah, here we go. No, is that where I was at? Okay, Gadsby thought a park. No, I wasn't. I'm pretty sure I was here. As Branton Hills found out what it can accomplish if it starts out with a vigor and a will to win. Uh-oh. No, I wasn't this far. Yeah, this is chapter 1. Okay, now, here's where I am. Alright. A lot of buildings could stand a good coat of paint and yards racking up, thus showing surrounding towns that not only could Branton Hills doll up, but had a glass of inhabitants who gladly would go at such a plan and carry it through. So Gadsby got his gang out to sally forth, and any man or woman who did not jump at first at such a plan by vigorous youth was always brought around through noticing how poorly a shabby yard did look. So Gadsby put in Branton Hills Post this stirring call. Raking up your yard or painting your building is simply improving it both in worth artistically and from a utilization standpoint. I know that many a city front lawn is small, but if it is only fairly big, a walk cut curvingly will add to it surprisingly. That part of a walk which runs to your front door could show rows of small rocks, rough and natural, and grading from small to big, but no hit-or-miss layout. If you can so fix up your yard as to form an approach to unity and plan with such as adjoin you, though without actual duplication, thus providing harmony for all who may pass by, it is in fact a bit of city planning, and anybody who aids in such work is a most worthy inhabitant. So cut your scraggly lawns, trim your old shaggy shrubs, bring into artistic form your grass-grown walks. Now naturally, in such writing a story as this, with its conditions as laid down in its introduction, it is not surprising that an occasional rough spot in composition is found. So I trust that a critical public will hold constant in that a critical public will hold constantly in mind that I am voluntarily avoiding words containing that symbol, for which is by far of most common inclusion in writing our Anglo-Saxon as it is today. Many of our most common words cannot show, so I must adopt synonyms, and so twist a thought around as to say what I wish with as much clarity as I can. So now to go on with this odd contraption. By autumn, a man who took his vacation in July would hardly show his town upon coming back. Nose itches. So thoroughly had thousands dug in to aid in its transformation. Boys, said Gadsby, you can pat your own backs if you can't find anybody to do it for you. This city is proud of you. And girls, just sing with joy, for not only is your city proud of you, but I am too. But how about you, sir, and your work? This was from Frank, a boy brought up to think fairly on all things. Oh, said Gadsby laughingly. I don't do much of anything but boss you young folks around. If our council awards any diplomas, I don't want any. I would look ridiculous strutting around with a diploma with a pink ribbon on it. Now, wouldn't I? This talk of diplomas was as a bolt from a bright sky to this young hustling bunch, but through Gadsby's words did sound as though a grown man would want such a thing that wasn't saying that a young boy or girl wouldn't. That's such a confusing sentence. And with this surprising possibility ranking in young minds, many a kid was in an anti-soporific condition for parts of many a night. But a kindly councilman actually did bring up a bill about this diploma affair, and his collaborators put it through, which naturally brought up talk as how to award such diplomas. At last, it was thought that a big public affair at City Hall with our organization on a platform with Branton Hills mayor and council would furnish an all-around satisfactory way. Such an occasion was worthy of a lot of planning, and a first thought was for flags and bunting on all public buildings with a grand illumination at night. Stationary lights should glow from all points on which a light could stand, hang, or swing, and gigantic rays should swoop and swish across clouds and sky. Bands should play, boys and girls march and sing, and a vast crowd would pour into City Hall. As on similar occasions, a bad rush for chairs was apt to occur. A company of military units should occupy all important points to hold back anything simulating a jam. Now, if you think our organization wasn't all agog and wild with youthful anticipation at having a diploma for work out of school hours, you just don't know youth. Boys and girls, though not full-grown inhabitants of a city, do know what will add to its popularity, and having had a part in bringing about such conditions, it was but natural to look back upon such as any military man might at winning a difficult fight. So finally, our big day was at hand, that it might not cut into school hours, that it might not cut into school hours. It was on a Saturday, and by noon, about 1,000 kids singing, shouting, and waving flags stood in formation at City Park, awaiting with growing thrills a signal which would start as big a turnout as Branton Hills had known in all its history. Up at City Hall, awaiting arrivals of city officials, a big crowd sat, row upon row of chairs which not only took up all floor room, but also many a small spot in doorway or on a balcony in which a chair or stool could find footing, and all who could not find such an opportunity willingly stood in back. Just as a group of officials sat down on that flag-bound platform, distant throbbing of drums and bright, snappy band music told of Branton Hills approaching thousands of kids who, finally marching in through City Hall's main door, stood in a solid mass around that big room. Naturally, Gadsby had to put his satisfaction into words, and advancing into a mahogany stand, stood waiting for a storm of hand-clapping and shouts to quit, and said, "Your Honor, Mayor of Branton Hills, its council, and all of you in front, if you would only stop rating a child's ability by your own, and try to find out just what ability a child has, our young folks throughout this big world could show a surprisingly willing disposition to try things which would bring your appreciation." I'm going to double check to see if this thing is recording. Yeah, it's recording, yes. A child's brain is an astonishing thing. It has in its construction an astounding capacity for absorbing what is brought into it, and not only to think about, but to find ways for improving it. It is today's child who tomorrow will, laugh at our ways of doing things. So, in putting across this campaign of building up our community into a municipality which has won acclaim, not only from its officials and inhabitants, but from surrounding towns, I've found, in our young folks, an out-and-out inclination to assist. And you today can look upon it as labor in which your adult aid was but a small factor. So now, my organization of youth, if you will pass across this platform, your mayor will hand you your diplomas. I'm trying to be like Taze on day. You have to face away from the mic while breathing. So that way, the whole time I'm not like this. Not in all Branton Hills' history had any boy or girl known such a thrill as upon winning that hard-won role. Give me a second. Oh, my heater was kicking on, but it's way too hot in here for my heater to be on. Not in all Branton Hills' history had any boy or girl known such a thrill as upon winning that hard-won role, and from solid banks of humanity, roars of congratulation burst forth as soon as Mayor Brown shook hands, and such tiny, warm, soft, young hands too, not creepy at all, with all a big outdoor lunch was found waiting on a charming lawn back of City Hall, and this was no World War mobilization lunch of donuts and a hot dog sandwich, but as two of Gadsby's sons said, an all-around good big fill-up, and many a boy's and girl's tummy was soon as round and taut as a balloon. As twilight was turning to dusk, boys in an adjoining lot shot skyward a crashing bomb announcement, a grand illumination as a fitting climax for so glorious a day. And thousands sat on rock walls, grassy knolls, and cars or at windows, with a big crowd standing along curbs and sidewalks. Myriads of lights of all colors, in solid balls, sprays, sparkling fountains, and bursts of glory, shot in crisscross paths up and down, back and forth, across a starlit sky, providing a display without a par in local annals. But not only did youth thrill at so fantastic a show, adults had many a 4th of July brought back from the distant past, in which our national custom wound up our most important holiday with a similar display, only in our 4ths of long ago, horrifying gigantic concussions would disturb old folks and invalids until midnight, at which hour, according to law, all such carrying on must stop. But did it? Possibly in your town, but not around my district. All 4th of July outfits don't always function at first, and no kid or adult would think of quitting until that last pop should pop, or that last bang should bang. And so, many a dawn on July 5th, found things still going full blast. How long have I been going? How long have I been going? 20 minutes? How long was my other one? Almost 45? Okay, we can go for another one. Another chapter. Okay, so I guess this will be... Hold on a I don't want to get confused things. That might have just been a short chapter. And if so, then I don't want to confuse the reader. Oh yeah, chapter 1 was way longer than chapter 2. Chapter 1's the longest one of the book. Longest one of the book. Okay, alrighty. Well, I'll just read for... I need to plan ahead better, don't I? Okay, I can read second and third chapter. Okay, and if I can find it. Here we go. Wait, it was right there. Okay, chapter 3. Youth cannot stay for long in a condition of inactivity. And so for only about a month did things so stand until a particularly bright girl in our organization thought out a plan for caring for infants of folk who had to go out to work, and this bright kid soon had a group of girls who would join during vacation in voluntarily giving up 4 days a month to such work. With about 50 girls collaborating, all districts had this most gracious aid, and a girl would not only watch and guard, but would also instruct as far as practical any such tot as had not had its first schooling. I'm trying to not breathe right in front of the mic, sorry. Such work by young girls still in school was a grand thing, and Gadsby not only stood up for such loyalty, but got at his boys to find a similar plan. And soon had a full troop of boys, uniforms and all. This automatically brought about a Girl Scout unit, and through a collaboration of both, a form of club sprang up. It was a club in which any boy or girl of a family owning a car would call mornings for pupils having no cars during school days for a trip to school and back. This was not only a saving in long walks for many, but also took from a young back that hard, tiring strain from lugging such armfuls of books as you find pupils laboriously carrying today. Upon arriving at a school building, many cars would unload so many books that Gadsby said, quote, oh, the word quote has an E in it, doesn't it? So, well, the word quote is not actually in here. You would think that a public library branch was moving in. This car work soon brought up a thought of giving similar aid to ailing adults who, not owning a car, could not know of that vast display of hill and plain so common to a majority of our townsfolks. So a plan was laid, by which a car would call 2 days a month, and for an hour or so, following roads winding out of town and through woods, farmlands, and suburbs, showing distant ponds and that grand arc of sky which shut-ins, known only from photographs. Ah, how that plan did stir up joyous anticipation amongst such as thus had an opportunity to call upon old loving pals and talk of old customs and in past days. Occasionally, such a talk would last so long that a youthful motorist waiting dutifully at a curb thought that a full family history of both host and visitor was up for an airing. But folks always will talk, and it will not do a boy or a girl any harm to wait. And for, that boy or girl will act in just that way at a not too far off day. But popular as this touring plan was, it had to stop. For school again took all young folks from such outdoor activity. Sorry, let me catch my breath. I was so focused on trying to keep this moved along that I kind of just didn't realize how out of breath I was getting. But popular as this tour plan was, it had to stop, for school again took all young folks from such outdoor activity. Nobody was so sorry at this as Gadsby, for though Branton Hills' suburban country is glorious from March to August, it is also strong in its attractions throughout autumn, with its artistic colorings of fruits, pumpkins, corn shocks, haystacks, and fall blossoms. So Gadsby got a big motor coach company to run a bus a day, carrying gratis all poor or sickly folks who had a doctor's affidavit that such an outing would aid in curing ills arising from too constant indoor living. And so, up almost to Thanksgiving, this big coach ran daily. As spring got around again, this man of all work thought of driving away a shut-in invalid's monotony. Oh yeah. Runaway shut-in's monotony by having musicians go to such rooms to play, or by taking along a vocalist or trio, sing such old songs as always bring back happy days. This work Gadsby thought of paying for by putting on a circus. And was it a circus? It was. It had boys forming both front and hind limbs of animals totally unknown to zoology. Girls strutting around as gigantic birds of doubtful origin. And an array of small living animals such as trick dogs and goats, a dancing pony, a group of imitation Indians, cowboys, cowgirls, a kicking trick jackass, and talk about clowns. 40 boys got into baggy pantaloons and fool's caps. And no circus, including that first of all shows in Noah's Ark, had so much going on. Gymnasts from our school gymnasium, tumbling, jumping, and racing, comic dancing, a clown band, high-swinging artists, and a funny cop who didn't wait to find out who a man was, but hit him anyway. That didn't age well, did it? And as no circus is a circus without boys shouting wildly about popcorn and cold drinks, Gadsby saw to it that such boys got in as many patrons' way as any ambitious youth could. And that is going strong, if you know boys at all. But what about profits? It not only paid for all acts which his organization couldn't put on, but it was found that a big fund for many a day's musical visitations was on hand. Let me catch my breath. And now a word or two about municipal affairs in this city, or any city, in which nobody will think of doing anything about its poor and sick without a vigorous prodding up. City councils nowadays willingly grant big appropriations for paving, lights, schools, jails, courts, and so on, but invariably fight shy of charity, which is nothing but sympathy for anybody who is down and out. No man can say that charity will not, during coming days, aid him in supporting his family, and it was Gadsby's claim that humans, not blocks of buildings, form what mankind calls a city. But what would big, costly buildings amount to if all who work in such cannot maintain that good physical condition paramount in carrying on a city's various forms of labor? And not only physical good, but also a mind happy from lack of worry and of that stagnation which always follows a monotonous daily grind. So our organization was soon out again, agitating the city officials and civilians toward building a big auditorium in which all kinds of shows and sports could occur, with also a swimming pool and hot cold baths. Such a building cannot so much as start without financial backing, but gradually many an iron-bound bank account was drawn upon, much as you pull a tooth, to buy bonds. Also, such a building won't grow up in a night, nor was a spot upon which to build it found without a lot of agitation, many wanting it in a downtown district, and also many who had vacant land put forth all sorts of claims to obtain cash for lots upon which a big tax was paid annually without profits. But all such things automatically turned out satisfactory to a majority, though an ugly grasping landlord who lost out would viciously squawk that municipal graft was against him. Now, Gadsby was vigorously against graft, not only in city affairs but in any kind of transaction, and that stab brought forth such a flow of oratory from him that, as voting for mayor was soon to occur, and a long list of good works soon had him up for that position. Gadsby didn't want such a nomination. Still, thousands of townfolks who had known him from childhood would not hark to anything but his candidacy, and soon, on window cards, signs, and flags across Broadway, his photograph and Gadsby for mayor and a campaign was on, which still rings in Branton Hills history as hot stuff. Four aspiring politicians ran in opposition, and as all had good backing, and Gadsby only his public works to fall back on, things soon got looking gloomy for him. His antagonists, standing upon a soapbox, auto truck, or hastily built platforms, put forth a prodigious vim claims that our fair city will go back to its original oblivion if I am not its mayor. But our organization now took a hand, most of which, now out of high school, was growing up rapidly. And anybody who knows anything at all about Branton Hills history knows that if this band of bright, loyal pals of Gadsby's was out to attain a goal, it was mighty apt to start things humming. To say that Gadsby's rivals got a bad jolt as it got around town that his bunch of warriors was aiding him would, put it mildly, to quit instantly, saying that this is a day of youth and no adult has half a show against it. But two still hung on, clinging to a sort of fond fantasy that Gadsby, not naturally a public sort of man, might voluntarily drop out. But had Gadsby so much as thought of such an action, his organization would soon laugh it to scorn. "Why, good gracious," said Frank Morgan, "if anybody should sit in that mayor's chair in City Hall, it's you. Just look at what you did to boost Branton Hills. Until you got it a-going, it had but 2,000 inhabitants. Now it has 60,000. And just ask your rivals to point to any part of it that you didn't build up. Look at our public library, municipal band, occupational classrooms, auto and bus trips, and your circus, which paid for music for sick folks. With you as mayor, boy, what an opportunity to boss and swing things your own way. Why, anything you might say is as good as law, and..." "Now hold on, boy," said Gadsby. "A mayor can't boss things in any way, a mayor can't boss things in any such a way as you think. A mayor has a council, which has to pass on all bills brought up, and, my boy, upon arriving at manhood, you'll find that a mayor who can boss a council around is a most uncommon bird. And as for a mayor's word amounting to law, it's a mighty good thing that it can't. Why, a mayor can't do much of anything today, Frank, without a bunch of crazy bat brains stirring up a rumpus about his acts looking suspiciously shady. Now that is a bad condition in which to find a city, Frank. You boys don't know anything about graft, but as you grow up, you will find many flaws in a city's laws, but also many points thoroughly good and fair. Just try to think what a city would amount to if a solitary man could control its law making as a king or sultan of old. That was why so many millions of inhabitants would start wars and riots against a tyrant. For many, a king was a tyrant, Frank, and had no thought as to how his laws would suit his thousands of rich and poor. A law that might suit a rich man might work all kinds of havoc with a poor family. "But," said Frank, "why should a king pass a law that would dissatisfy anybody?" Gadsby's parry to this rising youthful ambition for light on political affairs was, "Why will a duck go into a pond?" And Frank found that though a growing young man might not know a thing or two, making laws for his city was a man's job. So, with a mayoralty campaign on his hands, plus planning for that big auditorium, Gadsby was as busy as a fly around a syrup jug. For a massive campaign, mail had to go out. Topics for orations thought up, and contacts with his now truly important organization of youth took so many hours out of his days that his family hardly saw him at all. Noon naturally stood out as a good opportunity for oratory, as thousands out for lunch would stop in passing. But also, many a hall rang with plaudits as an antagonist won a point, but many a throng saw Gadsby's good points and plainly told him so by turning out voluminously at any point which his oratory was to flow. It was truly miraculous how this man of shy disposition found words in putting forth his plans for improving Branton Hills, town of his birth. Many an orator has grown up from an unassuming individual who had things worth saying, and who, through that curious facility, which is born of a conviction that his plans had practical basis, won many a ballot against such prolific flows of high-sounding words, and his antagonist had in stock. Many a night Gadsby was all in, as his worn-out body and aching throat sought his downy couch. No campaign is a cinch. With so many minds among a city's population, just that many calls for this or that swung back and forth until that most important of all days, voting day, was at hand. With crowds, mobs, and jams did assail all polling booths, casting ballots to land a party man in City Hall. If a voting booth was in a school building, as is a common custom, pupils had that day off, and as Gadsby was youth's champion, groups of kids hung around watching and hoping with that avidity so common with youth that Gadsby would win by a majority unknown in Branton Hills. And Gadsby did. As soon as it was shown by official count, Branton Hills was a riot, from City Hall to city limits. Throngs tramping around, tossing hats aloft, for a hard-working man had won what many thousands thought was fair and just. It's actually starting to come together into a story. This past week I had COVID-19, and it was not very, very pleasant. However, though, this was pleasant, though. So yeah, that was chapters 2 and 3, and yeah, as this keeps on getting more attention, I'll keep going. I'll continue it. This is in the public domain, so we can do whatever it is we want to with it, because it's really old. Gadsby, a book that does not use the letter E, by Ernest Vincent Wright.